The Flywheel Explorer pretty much defined the 4-inch lightweight long-range category. But just because it was the first doesn't mean it was the best. This is the iFlight Chimera, iFlight's entry into this category. And what we're going to do, we're not going to do a direct head-to-head comparison of these two quads because there's the Flywheel Explorer, there's the iFlight Chimera, and I've also got the GEP-RC Baby Crocodile, another entry in that category. So rather than compare these guys directly, I'm going to do an individual review of each one. This one is the iFlight Chimera. And then in a separate video, after I've really gotten into the details, I'll do a head-to-head shootout to kind of help you figure out which one is the best for you. But today, let's go deep on the iFlight Chimera. I'm Joshua Bardwell, and you're going to learn something today. Before we dive into the review of the iFlight Chimera, we got to specify which Chimera we're reviewing. And no, I don't just mean Vista or analog. Obviously, they sent the Vista version. Sorry, analog lovers. The Chimera comes in 2 motor KVs. Like most quads in this category, the Chimera comes with 1404 motors. But the Chimera can be ordered with either 3800 kV motors, which is the ones that are on the quad right now, or 3000 kV motors. 3000 kV-ish is what the original Dave C design that all of these quads are based on uses. And 3000 kV is going to give you that long flight time, smooth cruising, but not a lot of power for acro experience. When iFlight offered me this quad for review, they asked, which KV do you want? I said, my first answer was, we should just do the 3000 kV so it's an apples to apples comparison against the other quads in this roundup. But then I was like, why shouldn't I try something different? Maybe there's something here, because 3800 kV is going to give you a lot more power to pull out of a dive or make a sudden correction if you are trying to fly proximity at speed, especially if you're carrying one of these heavier lithium-ion battery packs. But 3800 kV is going to give you much shorter flight time. And isn't that the whole point? If you want a 4-inch acro basher, is this even really the right quad to get? That is why I asked to get the 3800 kV motors so I could try to answer some of those questions. Another thing that differentiates the Chimera from the other quads in this class is that it comes with an X layout for its motors, as opposed to like a deadcat style layout. And that means that you are going to see the front motors in the DJI camera. Again, it feels like iFlight is moving a little more towards an acro quad than a long distance cruiser with this design. You can get a deadcat style bottom plate. You have to buy that separately, and of course you'll have to swap it out. I don't think, at this time at least, that they're selling it with the deadcat bottom plate pre-installed. The Chimera comes with a bunch of accessories in the box, including this protective bumper for the camera. That's very nice to see, to protect that lens. The camera is the full Caddx Vista, not the Nebula, which I think is a plus. Pretty much everybody seems to agree the Nebula has much worse image quality. Even the V2 Nebula is still worse. The camera is mounted using this 3D printed holder here, and it does use a 2-screw mounting type with a second screw to lock in the camera angle. The minimum camera angle seems to be about 20 degrees, and the maximum angle is, well, as much as you could really possibly want. Looks like about 45-ish degrees. The Chimera also comes with a custom printed battery pad. I've said in other reviews that I usually prefer to use something like Grip, which is a gel battery pad, which is just a little thicker and grippier. In this case, I might prefer the factory pad, and the reason is that the receiver is mounted up here underneath the top plate. Hang on, let me switch angles for you. Yeah, so the receiver is in this 3D printed holder here, and you can access the bind button and check the LED status just by looking down through the top plate. If I was to put Grip on, it would not be custom cut to this top plate. So, yeah, I don't know. I might could just put it here, but it wouldn't have a lot to grip onto because of this cutout. So I probably would stick with the factory pad here, and it'll probably be fine, but it's not as grippy as I might like it to be. The props that iFlight includes are the iFlight Nazgul. These are a 40-25 prop, the same as basically everybody else in this category uses, but instead of going with like the gem fans, they're using their own design. And you can see they are very close in design. The Nazgul Seems to have just a little bit more of a dip here near the hub. Does it though? I mean, they seem like they're basically the same. As far as the rest of the build goes, this is a very basic kind of school bus style build. That's what I've heard this kind of frame referred to. It has a solid bottom plate. Some people are going to find that controversial since it means you can't replace an arm if it were to break. On the other hand, these kind of quadcopters are more designed for like long range cruising, and high impact crashes are hopefully going to be more rare than if you have like an acro basher. On the other hand, the whole freaking point of these 3800 kV motors is that you can be a little more aggressive, so maybe interchangeable arms would have been nice, but I'm sure people go both directions on this, and I don't feel too strongly either way. The flight controller and ESC are a 20mm iFlight stack. The ESC does come pre-flashed with Jazz Maverick firmware, so RPM filtering can be enabled by default. I think this is the only one to do that. I'll talk about that more in the shootout video, which is going to follow the individual reviews of each of these quads, so definitely get subscribed and hit that notification bell if you don't want to miss that. And the Vista is mounted in the back using the 20mm mounting holes, and it is soft mounted on these gummies, but I think the real reason for the gummy, I mean, you don't need to soft mount the Vista. I think the real reason is that the wires for the Vista go underneath, and so they just need a little space to keep those from getting crushed. Also worth noting that there's a buzzer up here in this 3D printed mount. It would be nice if it was a self-powered buzzer, but you got a buzzer there. Hopefully you won't lose your battery. Nah, I would probably add a self-powered buzzer to this, especially if I was going to be flying at long range and I might go down somewhere far, far away and have trouble finding it. Oh, that's really freaking cool. So you can mount a 20mm stack here, or you can mount a 25mm all-in-one flight controller. If you were to buy this frame to build your own, you can boot. They've got mounting for both 20 and 25 without changing the size of the bottom plate at all. And is this a 16 here? Yeah, so you got 16mm, 20mm, and 25mm all in one frame. That's pretty slick, actually. The dry weight of the Chimera is, I'm going to put the props on here as well. And how about the screws? There, we got some screws. 180 grams dry, which gives you about, only about 70 grams for your battery if you want to stay under that 250 gram limit. If we add a naked GoPro, we come to 212 grams. Yikes. This guy's going to struggle to stay under 250 grams, even without a naked GoPro, but with like a GoPro or something on it, it's going to be a little bit of work. If you are concerned with weight, my suggested battery is this 520 milliamp hour GNB high volt. You can see here we're at 235 grams, so we even have a little bit of weight to spare. And that, because it's a high volt, you'll get more milliamp hours per gram. Just the battery will wear out sooner. I don't think, even with that pack, nah, we're just not. This is, if you're concerned about 250 grams, this one may not be the one for you. In just a minute, we're going to go outside and fly the Chimera. But before we do that, let's take a look at the Betaflight configuration and see if there are any gotchas in there that you need to know about. This is also normally the part of the video where I might show you how to set up the quadcopter if this is like your first quad. But I haven't been doing that for the DJI builds. And the reason is that basically all the DJI builds are set up the same. You update the firmware and activate the DJI. You set up the aux modes and bind and yada, yada, yada. So instead of showing you how that all works here, I'm going to refer you to another video where I set up a different DJI quadcopter, and the process is almost the same. I'll put a link to that down in the video description. Instead, let's just focus on things that are really specific to this quad in the Betaflight configuration. And the first thing I notice is that the buzzer can still beep just a tiny bit, even if the battery isn't plugged in, which is kind of annoying. So let's see if we can fix that. Go to the configuration tab, and down here in the beeper configuration, we turn off the USB option, and this should make the buzzer stop beeping when we're plugged into USB. Good save. You should definitely do that. Here in the ports tab, I'm really pleased to see that there are 4 hardware UARTs on this flight controller. Some of the other quadcopters in this class use soft serial for some of their communications, and at least in Betaflight 4.2 there is a bug with soft serial, and the effect is that like your OSD will stop updating if you're using the DJI goggles. iFlight have totally sidestepped that issue by having enough hardware UARTs on the flight controller that all of the functions, the receiver, the OSD to the DJI goggles, the GPS, and there's even a spare UART that you could use for, I don't know, whatever else you might want to use it for. This is a clear win for iFlight compared to some of the others in this category. iFlight have delivered the Chimera with props out rotation. That is something that would be more common for a racing or freestyle quad as opposed to like a long distance cruiser. On a long distance cruiser, it kind of doesn't matter too much either way. So the possibility of using this quad with the 3800 kV motors as an acro quad is probably why they've done this. That is probably the same reason why they've shipped it with bidirectional D-shot and RPM filtering enabled. Again, this is more the kind of thing you would see on an acro quad rather than a long distance cruiser. It's interesting to me that they've shipped it with the motor beeper enabled. The purpose of the motor beeper is that if you don't have a buzzer on the quad, then when you try to make the beeper go off, for example, if you've crashed and you've lost your quad in the bushes or the tall grass, you use the beeper to find the quad. This quad does ship with a beeper, so I guess extra beeping is always good, but most of the time, if you had a dedicated beeper, you would turn off the motor beeper. You can leave it on. There's no harm in it. A little more beeping is always nice, I guess. Here in the power and battery tab, I'm going to suggest you raise the maximum cell voltage from 4.3 to 4.4 if you intend to use high volt batteries. And I do suggest, especially if you're concerned with the 250 gram weight limit, that you're going to be using high volt batteries. You'll get just a little bit more milliamp hour per gram out of them. But if you don't change that maximum cell voltage, Betaflight will mistakenly read your fully charged high volt 4S as a discharged 5S and be yelling at you low voltage the whole time. So we're going to change that to 4.4. And down here at the bottom, we'll just hit save. It's interesting that the failsafe is set to drop. The Chimera does come with a GPS receiver, and so you could choose to use GPS rescue as your failsafe method. And that is how most of the other quads in this category are coming shipped. GPS rescue means that when you failsafe, the quad will attempt to fly back home to you. Now that's a good thing if you're flying out among the mountains. It's a bad thing if you're flying like under the treetops. You wouldn't want it to just try to fly up into the air and crash into a tree. So if you intend to use this more for like acro, then you would want failsafe set to drop. But you could choose to set it to GPS rescue. And if you did that, here are the settings that I would suggest. And I've made a couple changes from default here. One is I've changed the minimum satellites from 8 to 5. 8 is really the best for the maximum position hold. 5 is really the least you could possibly want. If you find that your GPS always gets lots of sats, I would change that back to 8, but sometimes the GPS will have a trouble getting all the satellites locked. I have enabled allow arming without fix, and what this means is you can take off without satellites locked, but if you try to activate GPS rescue, your quad will just fall out of the air. It will not be able to fly home unless you wait for satellite lock before you take off. And then the last thing I've changed is I've changed sanity checks to from on to fail-safe only, and that means that if you activate GPS rescue using an aux mode, the quadcopter will not do any sort of safety checks, but it might try to fly to the moon, in which case you would need to be ready to turn that off. Here in the modes tab, iFlight have set up an arming mode. Angle mode is active all the time, so you're definitely going to want to change that if you want to fly any acro. And beeper is enabled, and the fail-safe position is to activate the beeper, which doesn't make any, I guess they want it beeping when you fail-safe. Okay, I guess that does that anyway, so seems a little redundant, but okay. You're definitely going to want to set up the aux modes yourself, and if you need a tutorial for how to set up aux modes, either for the DJI or for the analog version, I'll put a link in the video description to some tutorials I've made. They're not for this exact quad, but the steps are more or less the same. The on-screen display is pretty freaking crowded. It's going to look less crowded in the DJI goggles if you're using the DJI version, because they will sort of spread out these elements to the widescreen. If you do need to know how to set up the DJI goggles to show the custom OSD, they don't come shipped that way by default. What you need to do is go into the goggles, go into the goggle menu, and enable the Show Custom OSD option. Go to Settings, Display, and make sure that Custom OSD is set to On, and that will let you see all these extra OSD elements in the on-screen display. If I were flying the analog version of this quad, I definitely would move some of this stuff around so it's not just cluttering up the entire bottom of my screen, and you can just drag or drop this however you want to lay it out. Well, okay, let's put this guy in the air and see how it flies. And I do want to let you know, this is not my first test flight on it. I've gotten enough packs on it to try and get a sense of what I think I want to say. And now I'm going to try and just give you one flight that kind of sums it all up. The battery we're using is an 850 milliamp hour 4S, and this guy comes in around 275 grams all up, as flown with this pack. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this protector off the camera. You can see that it, even when I've tried installing it every way I can think of, and you just get a little bit of vignetting around the edge. It's more than vignetting. You can just see the damn thing. If you were going to fly this guy hard acro, this would definitely help save the lens, but for this kind of thing, I'm not going to use it. And I really think there's ones that fit a little differently and don't have that effect. So it feels like they're trying to be a little more protective, but let's just take that off. There we go. Should also point out I am using the Lumenier Axii HD patch antenna, so I'm gonna have a little more coverage in the direction I'm facing and a little less coverage behind me. I've got a review of that antenna out. I'll put a link to it in the video description if you're thinking about getting it. The first thing I want to show you guys is just how this guy flies if you try to fly it a little more like an acro quad. It does have the 3700 kV motors on it, so it's got a little more pop and speed. So it's got a little bit of punch, not a huge amount. If we were to put it on tri-blades, we would get a little more punch, but you definitely can acro this guy. The tune isn't really focused on acro, I think, because if you really push, oh, that was close. If you really push it, you'll get a little bit of prop wash, but that's kind of not the number one thing this is probably tuned for. And the potential for smashing it while doing this kind of thing is why they've got the heavier bottom plate than the other guys in this category. Now, if I fly it like a freestyle ripper, I'm going to get a shorter flight time. We're at 1 minute. We're already down to 3.6 We're already down to 3.6 on the throttle punches. This is a ADC battery. I got it originally for the Tommy Bahia squad, the frickin' Acrobat. If I just go a little slower though, it should pick back up. Oh, I don't want to fly over that guy though. Let's not fly over the civilians, the people, pedestrians. That's the word I was looking for. If I just fly it a little slower though, the battery will hang in longer. I feel like for this 850 milliamp hour pack, if you're trying to do acro, you're going to get 2.5 to 3 minutes of flight time, maybe a little more depending on how hard you're pushing it with these 3700 kV motors. I flew a 520 milliamp hour GNB high volt, and I got about the same flight time with less weight and more pop. So again, the advantage of high volts is very clear. On the other hand, if we just go do this kind of cruising, we're going to get a lot longer flight time, maybe in the 5 to 6 minutes range off of this particular battery. And if you were to put a heavier battery on it, which you certainly could do, since when you're doing this kind of cruising, weight is less of a factor in terms of punch and more of a factor in terms of just overall flight time. But you could go up to like a 1000 milliamp hour 4S and get just minutes and minutes of flight time. Ooh, the trees sure are beautiful right now. In fact, I put a 3000 milliamp hour 4S lithium ion on here, and I flew it from 4.1 volts down to 3.8 volts. After 10 minutes, I was just like, I guess I'm done flying, I'm bored. I guarantee I could have gotten like 20 minutes, no problem, and maybe more. iFlight has reported over 30 minutes of flight time on a similar pack, because those lithium ions can go down to 2.5 volts. So I'm going to be careful, because I'm not facing this direction, so I'm going to be careful flying around here that I don't lose signal. I am flying on crossfire control, not DJI control, so I shouldn't have any issue with fail-safing, but I'll want to watch out for my video. See, video's breaking up here on the side. Very nice. 3.7. Just can keep cruising around the treetops. A big question that I think I would like to try to address in this video is whether the 3700 kV motors or the 3000 kV motors are a better choice for more people. I think the nice thing about the higher kV motors is you have the option to have more power if you want it. And you can always use a throttle curve to bring the throttle down and sort of force you to go easy. And that gets you more flight time. There is an efficiency hit for the higher kV motors, but it's not as much as you might think. And if you just go gentle on the throttle, your flight time will extend to, well, like I said, easily 20 minutes with these motors. The 3700 kV, easily 20 minutes on a 3000 milliamp hour 4S lithium ion. So I think I would probably take the 3700s as just kind of a best of both worlds. But if I knew I didn't want to do the acro stuff, just watching out for that guy walking his dog. If I knew I didn't want to do the acro stuff, if I just knew that wasn't where I was going, then the 3000 kVs are going to give you a little more flight time and efficiency. Let me turn my head. We're getting some break up there, so I'm down low. Those 3000 kVs will give you a little more flight time and efficiency at the expense of power. Especially like coming out of a dive or something, you'd want to watch out with the 3000s, especially if you had the heavier battery on there. Just so fun to be able to go up here. The signal looks great, 50 megabits per second. We know the Caddx Vista system can more than handle this difference, especially with these antennas on the goggles. Beautiful. 3.6 volts. Just beautiful. Just beautiful. So that brings us to the end of the video, and as always, the question, should you buy it? And I'm going to go over what I see as the pros and cons of this quad, but the truth is, I can't really answer the should you buy it question until I've finished reviewing all the other quads in this category. The Flywheel Explorer 4, that review is already out. The GEP-RC Baby Croc and the Catalyst Machine Works Shocker are all quads that fit into this 4-inch long range category. I am working on reviews of all of these quads in parallel at this very moment, trying to get them out as soon as possible. And once I have fully reviewed each of those quads, I'm going to do a shootout video where I directly compare them head to head. Definitely get subscribed and hit the notification bell if you want to make sure you don't miss that. But in the meantime, what can we say about this quad? And one thing that stands out about this quad, and I'll spoil the shootout video a little bit, this is the only one of these guys that takes into account acro, freestyle, speedy flight. All of the other ones have 3000-ish kV motors, 2 millimeter or 1.5 millimeter plates. They're made to be as light as possible for as long a flight time as possible. But if you did decide to shoot a gap or something and crash them, they are not going to have the power and durability that the Chimera is going to have. And so it has more weight, thicker bottom plate, the availability of higher kV motors, although you certainly could get it with 3000 kV motors, although if you did that, it would be heavier, so it would kind of be maybe, yeah. So I think that if that seems like a good idea to you, you might already be able to settle on this one. And the truth is, it still has pretty amazing freaking flight time, especially if you put a bigger, heavier battery on it. So if you do want to cruise, oh, maybe your flight time will be 10 or 15% lower than the others, but who cares? Because it's already 20 freaking minutes or 25 minutes or 30 minutes. And If that seems like, no, I need 35 minutes or 40 minutes, then maybe you want to wait. But this one definitely stands out as a little bit more of a do-it-all. The Chimera4 can be ordered for about $300 if you're using a DJI controller, or it's an additional approximately $30 if you want a Crossfire receiver pre-installed. In addition, if you decide you want the deadcat style bottom plate, that is an additional $16. If you know what you need to know and you've made your final decision, you can order this quad from the links in the video description below. And they are affiliate links. That means I get a small commission if you make any purchase at the affiliated vendor after you click that link. Don't want to buy this quad? Click the affiliate link anyway. Go buy something else. It's an easy way for you to support the channel, and it costs you nothing. If you're not sure yet, definitely make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell so you do not miss the head-to-head where I will crown a winner among all 4 of these amazing quads in this category. But that is going to do it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and happy flying. What are you still doing here? The video's over. Do you watch all the videos all the way to the end? Wow. You are a super fan. Thank you. That actually helps the channel a lot when you watch the videos all the way to the end. YouTube loves that. You know what else YouTube loves? When you subscribe. Or when you join my Patreon for as little as $2 a month, or more if you feel like I've earned. Actually, YouTube doesn't like you to join my Patreon. They don't get a cut of that.